Whoa, everybody's here. From the beginning, I know I was a little late. I had a Zoom crash. I was excited because I was on time and then everything crashed. But I'm back. Good morning, all. Good to see you. Thank you to most of you for turning in the assignment yesterday. That's what I want to spend time on. As you know, those of you looking at your calendar, 1 week from today, you have your test. And that means different things for all of you. I'm sure for all of you, that's a point of, at the least, concern. So let's kind of like continue to parse that. Let's start by asking this. Either you can say it out loud in the, oh wait, there was one more person coming in. Okay, you can either say it out loud or you can type it publicly or privately to me. What do you feel like your needs are for this test that is this coming Thursday? What are your needs from me?
Maybe seeing how you would score a DBQ more in the new rubric.
Gotcha. I have, for those of you who did the most recent, this is not a complete answer to your question. For those of you who did the DBQ on AP Classroom, not the most recent one, but I scored the first one you did, and I wanted to score the other one, but only 8 people had completed it. That's why I sent you that announcement yesterday. And I'm getting even more off your question, I realize that. So yesterday I sent out the announcement, and the longer and longer I am in my office, the weirder my brain works. And so I decided that it would be interesting to make it sound like a clickbaity spam email. And so I had fun with that, but I realized it might have confused people. I was just trying to get those of you who have not done the assignment, I was opening them back up in AP Classroom. Once the due date hits, it locks you out and you can't do the assignment. So I went back and unlocked it until the end of the week. For those of you looking at your grades, as I have started to get things into the grade book, some of you have shown some concern regarding that. So I opened those back up. And that was the whole point of that bizarre announcement you got yesterday, if you checked that. For those of you who did turn it in, I was able to grade the DBQ. The weird thing is in the AP Classroom, that version of grading did not account for, one, it was like under the old BC rules, and two, it didn't allow for me to grade your sourcing, which I found strange. I don't know why it did that. So what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to be able to print out all of your DBQs that you just did to get those graded in I don't know the best way to return them. It's hard for me to write comments on them online. What I think I might actually have to resort to doing, printing them out, grading them, writing my comments on them, and then emailing you a PDF of them, which it sounds complicated, but unless any of you have a better method, that's how I think I'm gonna have to do it. So that's my plan to answer your question for getting you comments back. Usually, I'm processing. This is a lot to process, so I'm processing out loud here with you so you can hear my process and you can jump in and say, I don't know, Mr. Herman. Usually in years past, I have assigned a practice test, like usually 2 weeks before the test. Everyone comes in on a Sunday, they sit down, they take a test, and I grade all of it except for the essay questions and give it back to them to give them kind of an indicator of where they are in the whole process. As you may have recognized, everything has changed, so that system wouldn't work. I have therefore been trying to give you, you've had 2 so far, sit down, 45 minutes, write the thing. And they were both on the AP Classroom. The majority of you have done that. So you had the practice sitting down. So You've had the practice with the time management. And while you might not feel perfect at the time management, you've had practice doing it. So you know kind of what it will take. There'll, of course, be a different set of circumstances, nerves, excitement, exhilaration, dread that will play into your time management skills this coming Thursday. But bottom line, you've had experience with that. You know a little bit what to expect. I think I've covered that base without being able to have you all come in here and sit down and take a practice one. So the timing, that experience has been accomplished for most of you. But as far as feedback on the DBQ, that's where I'm having some difficulty. So I think in analyzing my answer just now, I've answered some of your question. Were you able to, those of you who checked, log into the AP classroom and see the scoring on the first DBQ?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's at least that, and it breaks it down by point, so that's helpful. So you know exactly where the things that were missing were. The only thing missing was the document analysis in terms of sourcing. That was not present for whatever reason. It was not a component of that DBQ, which I didn't realize until I started grading the things. In doing that, I recognized that the area that you're all collectively as a class the weakest was contextualization, which is why I assigned you yesterday the contextualization practice. What I noticed that you're not doing, and it's probably my fault for not mentioning this, when you use contextualization, you're not just coming up with other random events or your own descriptors of other things happening in history. You need to think of things that we can name, that we have generally agreed upon, we as the historic community have agreed upon, this is a named thing going on at this time. If you, for instance, say, they are reflecting the racism of the time, that would not be sufficient for contextualization. You would need to use the named thing, such as, this is an example of the social Darwinist ideas that were prevalent in Europe at the time. Contextualization needs to be a named process or development in the world or in other regions that is significant and influences things at that time. That's the way you would get that contextualization point. You have to name those other processes. And to name them, they have to be named things, things that are significant enough to have a term or a name attached to them. And this whole year, I've been talking about processes. It's those processes that is important. You can think really, really big processes, industrialization. You can think of dynastic cycles, like big ones. Or you can tighten it up a little bit and make it more relative to a region, but as long, it has to be named. That's what I'm trying to say there. It needs to be a named process or development in world history. So I reconfigured that assignment a little bit to use more clear language. Questions or comments on contextualization?
Yes.
Go.
Are we allowed to use the contextualization that we have for the entire document also as contextualization for our sourcing?
Yeah, but you'd have to do it again. So the first time you do it, you're doing it in terms of the document. What you're asking is kind of a gray area that it's not super addressed. That's why I say do it again. If you do it once in the introduction, that can't be your document sourcing, obviously, because you haven't introduced the document yet. If you did it again, if you come at it a different direction, you'd probably get the point for that.
Okay.
And that's one of those things, don't overanalyze that. If you do it in the moment, just do it and move on. Don't get meta about the process. Once you're in the process, you do not have time to get meta to worry about the process, to think about your process. You just put your head down and do it. That's why I've given you that, the checklist. Did anyone use the checklist for writing the most recent DBQ?
I attempted to.
Okay. Because I'm looking for feedback on that. I want that to be a useful process for students, because when you're in the moment, it's really difficult to organize your thoughts and your process. And sometimes you just need to follow directions, and that's the quickest way. The more you think, the slower you go. The purpose behind that checklist is to just give you a task list to follow almost blindly so that you can get done in time. For the two of you that kind of used it, was that your experience? Was it helpful? Did it help you speed up, or was it slowing?
So I looked at it before I took the actual like practice test.
Yeah.
And then I didn't actually look at it while I was working on the test. I just made sure that I was hitting the main points of it.
Gotcha. Was it useful in that? Did you feel, of course, rushed, but did you feel like you got too far off base while you were writing it, or did you pretty much stick to the process even if you were a little short on time?
I pretty much stuck to the process. It
So
was
did the
helpful.
process outlined, was it generally helpful to you?
Yes.
And my ego is not tied up at all in this. Don't
No,
worry, I can take it.
It was helpful, yeah.
Okay. Are there any ways that it could be more helpful? Was it too detailed? Did it ask you to do too much pre-writing? That was my concern.
I mean, it didn't really ask for too much pre-writing, but that being said, like I kind of modified it to fit how I
Good.
wanted it to work.
Good. And that's
So-
really what you're supposed to do, is you each have a different approach and process. Take that checklist, kind of memorize it, but also configure it so that it works best for you. That's why I wanted you all to use it during a pre-write, so you could get used to customizing that process and that checklist. Because in the moment, all the good ideas, you're like, oh yeah, I'll probably do that. That little bit of whatever brain chemical is stress often erases all those light tangential thoughts that you think will be with you for the test. They will not be with you for the test. And the only thing that will be with you are the practiced things that you've done in your process. So if you haven't looked at it yet, look at it. For those of you who have not yet done either the DBQs, use it to practice the DBQ on AP Classroom. And those of you who are doing this late, I won't be able to give you full credit, but I will give you substantial credit. I don't want to take away from those of you who have worked really hard to get things in on time, but at the same time, I understand this is kind of a chaotic time, and I will definitely reward you for having done the work.
Mr. Herman,
Yeah.
I can't see any gradings on DBQs on AP College Board.
Did you do yours?
I did the first one.
You did the first one and you don't see the grade on it?
Yeah, I only have 3 grades, and it's all progress check.
It was a progress check. The DBQ was a progress check. It was 6, I think, progress check unit 6. That was a DBQ.
It's called an FRQ, not a DBQ.
Oh,
in the
free
title.
response question.
Oh,
Sure.
okay.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. So without more feedback, good. Let's look at some of the, oh no, I didn't resolve what you need from between now and Thursday. I asked if you have to go to class on Thursday, and I have not heard back yet. So in the interest of shielding you from what I don't think will be a problem, but I am officially telling you, you can hit record, I'm officially telling you, you don't have to go to class on Thursday, you can use, you're going to want to log in half an hour ahead of time. So that means before 10:30, you're going to want to start logging in. Before 10:30, let's say 10 o'clock. And if you are extra anxious about this, I do recommend having a plan for the day. When you have a plan, even if it's a light plan, things go better and you're less panicky. 10 o'clock, make sure that you have your surroundings set up how you need it. You have your Google Docs either, printed out, make sure that they're not connected to any other students. Make sure you have nothing that could be considered cheating. Make sure that you don't have any of those web, whether the extensions installed. So make sure you have a browser that's clear and clean of anything that could be tagged as a cheating risk, that it won't raise flags. Also, make sure that you have gotten sleep that night, that you've eaten food, that you are hydrated, not overly hydrated because you don't want to have to stop to pee, but the right amount of hydration. All of those things. 10 o'clock, make sure your surroundings are good. 10:30, you will log in. 11, you will start writing. So just have that in order. Make sure that if you can go to class, but you're not required to. Okay, so that was a tangent from what you need between now and then. What I'm getting at is, would it be more beneficial for me to assign you another practice DBQ that is a 5-document DBQ, very similar to what you would see on the test, and to then try to grade that? Or would it be more helpful for me to assign you, having graded your most recent DBQ, give that back to you and have you do a rewrite before Thursday? Which one would be more beneficial to you?
New one.
I am in agreement with John.
I agree with Daniel agreeing with John.
I agree with Abel agreeing with Daniel, agreeing with John.
I agree with Keone, who agreed with me.
Okay. And with the rest of you, I want to give your voice consideration too. Just give me a nod if you agree with Keone agreeing with John, agreeing with the hole in the bottom of the sea. Okay, that works for me. So would that be better? Would you rather have a range or a day? When do we want to do this? Would Monday be better, where you kind of get back at it? Or do you want to get that attempted and started now? Like, not now, like I would, if I were to do it now, I would give you a range between, I would put the assignment up this afternoon and you would have a range between today and Friday to do it. Or do you want me to have it on Monday? Monday might be cutting it a little bit close, but if you have no thoughts on this, I would prefer sooner rather than later. So I would give it a time frame between now and the end of the week. You'll notice I didn't put a task list up today. I went to write one, and then I thought, I just need to talk to these people and figure out what they need first.
I think the range would be more beneficial.
Okay, so I'm going to have the due date by Friday. And I think that would give me time also to be able to make some comments. Now, the AP website is a useful interface for me, but then it's hard for me to grade and write notes. Oh, no, it's not, because I can write general comments on it. I just can't mark up the test. Oh, well, was that AP classroom interface all right for y'all? Okay. I think,
Sometimes
Yeah, go
when
ahead.
I was like taking the DBQ, it like logged me out of viewing the documents, but then it didn't actually affect my timer, I believe, but it was still problematic to be logged out mid writing.
I understand. I imagine that their system is probably under a little bit more stress right now than usual. I'm not trying to defend the college board as much. I'm trying to figure out to what extent I can trust it here. That's good feedback. I think it's the best system I have. I could also give you a system where you sit down and you write it by hand, but it's then hard for me to grade it. I think we'll continue to use that. And the worst case scenario is the official timer on their end is bad, but you have the real time and you know the real time. And it doesn't matter what their timer says. It's what you're doing this for you. You want to get better at this. And if you have a significant problem like that, talk to me, let me know, and then I'll figure that out. Because really this is for you. You need good feedback for you. Look for that by the end of the week. We'll get those in, we'll get those graded, and then I will respond to them. And to what extent will my feedback be helpful in this time frame?
So stuff that would be, I feel at least would be helpful would be just kind of sourcing, and if you could show us what would be qualifying of sourcing and how to do it, as well as being more concise, because I feel that I overanalyze, which wastes
That's a
time.
pretty big ask. Yes, that's something I don't have the capacity or time at this point to be injecting a bunch of examples of what would be, but what I certainly can do is say if you have an element or not. You would then, as the student, need to follow up with me on that, because this interface gives me a yes or a no. It doesn't give me half points. I usually use half points, and the half point means I see you're close, but you're not there. This is either all or nothing. So if you're close but not there, you don't get the point in the final version. So you would have to follow up with me and say, this is what I put, why didn't it qualify for the whole point? And I would say, and to save you time, usually my answer for why it didn't qualify for the whole point, it's usually because of vagueness. So if your answer is either vague or it doesn't support the claim of the paragraph or the paper, then you don't get the point. So those are the two things to remember. Make sure that it's specific and has, details, and it supports the claim of the paragraph / essay. The two most common mistakes I encounter. And
Yeah,
that's another, I mentioned that to you, Daniel, in the email correspondence we had. When you're trying to limit, when you approach an essay and you're time crunched, at least when I look at it and I look at the prompt, my brain immediately thinks of all the possibilities. And that becomes very difficult for me to write the essay because I'm seeing all of the possibilities and I'm supposed to write a couple on a piece of paper in a time limit. And that's what the checklist is for. And that's really what the structure and the claims and the evidence are supposed to get you to do, is say, this is my point. That way you only take those evidence pieces that support your point, and everything else you have to just block out. Push out everything. Once you have your claim, only take that which is part of your claim. The only caveat to that process is, if you're taking out only that which supports your claim, some students will take out details from the documents and use them to support a claim that is counter to the whole purpose of the document. You don't get points if you do that. But as long as the evidence you take from the documents to support your claim is in harmony with the document, that's good. So if you're approaching your essay like that, you're starting to build up a way to eliminate all the extra things, the things that are not important, so you can focus on what you need to do.
Yeah, so that was a big thing that John and Abel and I were discussing, and Keone, was about how sourcing has to relate to your thesis. So that was helpful.
Did my response help in that?
Yeah, so before we were thinking that your sourcing just has to show a different way that you can interpret the document, but not necessarily has to relate back up to your thesis. And so this has been
Yeah.
cool.
For the benefit of everyone else, the question was how to do sourcing, and what my response was is basically your sourcing can be thought of as the explanation. Remember the basic structure: claim, piece of evidence, explain the evidence. Your sourcing can be the explanation, because when you're doing sourcing, you're showing how that source is relevant. Relevant to what? Your claim. In the process of showing how something is relevant is very similar, and in many cases the same thing as an explanation. An explanation says, because this is, and let's look at the happy elements. If we're looking at context, you'd show, because in the world this historic process is happening, and this historic process is doing these sorts of things, we can assume that this source is doing that sort of thing. So it's like, I forget my mathematical logic steps. Would that be, it doesn't matter. Association, because this thing associates with this bigger concept, we can assume that this is part of that bigger concept, and that's an explanation of why it does in fact support your claim. Another example, so that's the context happy element. You could use the purpose. This author has this purpose. And your explanation is, we know that this author has a purpose because the author, and then you can use contextualization. They're interrelated. This author has this purpose because the author's purpose is this. We can assume that that is part of the claim. So you're just connecting it using the happy elements to connect and to expand on your explanation a little bit. Since I'm speaking it out loud, I don't know if I'm making as much sense. Sometimes I'm better when I write it out, but long story short, think of the sourcing elements as you're just bolstering your explanation of your evidence. ¿Hay más preguntas?
So when doing the evidence, would you want to state your evidence, explain your evidence, give your sourcing, then explain your sourcing, or just state your evidence, source, and then explain?
Well, what I'm saying here is that the source is known. You don't really have to state the source. Don't waste time saying the source data and just copying what the because the document, it'll say document 1, and it'll tell you about a bunch of source information. Do not waste time copying verbatim information from the document or from the sourcing information. That is a waste of time. The reader is approaching this knowing that information. So the assumption can be made that the reader is familiar with the documents and the source. You can't assume that the reader knows what to make of the documents and the source. That's your job when you write your essay. But you can assume that the reader and your audience in this limited capacity is very familiar with the documents and the source. So you can reference the source and go straight to explaining it. You don't have to take time to list out each element of the source that you want to say. You just write a sentence where the introduction, the first clause of the sentence is basically, the author of this document was and then say the relevant thing you're talking about. So they'll give you like 3 or 4 different sometimes source information. You'd cite the one thing that you're talking about. Don't do more than one thing. This author was part of the butterfly equal right movement. And this was a global phenomenon whereby people decided that butterflies deserve equal rights to human beings. Therefore, the intended purpose of this author's speech is to inspire people to see butterflies as equal to human beings. So that way, you're referencing it, but you don't spend time on it. You're getting more into your explanation. And these tricks are difficult. One of the most difficult things about writing is to be concise. That's where true artists, true writers, that's where you see their craft and their professionalism. So if you're frustrated that you're not there yet, join the club. The best painters can convey a beautiful idea in fewer brush strokes than like sometimes amateur painters will spend lots and lots of time, and then a professional artist will be able to convey the same idea with maybe 3 brush strokes, and you're like, oh, how did you do that? And that's just practice, dedication to the craft, and all of those things. As you're learning, it's very difficult to know what to leave in, what to leave out. So that's more to affirm. I know you want me to tell you how to eliminate that stuff, and I'm telling you it's an ongoing process. And don't feel bad if you're not there yet. Just keep practicing, knowing what to leave in, what to leave out. So to re-circle to what you were saying, if you're looking at claim, evidence, explanation, sourcing, explanation of source, if you have to do all of those steps, do all of those steps. But I would encourage you to look at combining sourcing and explanation. If you want to talk about sourcing separately, that would be what you would do in either a catch-all paragraph at the end when you realize, I don't have enough sourcing, I'm going to throw that in. Or if you get to the end of the paragraph, and this is not a bad thing to do. If you get to the end of the paragraph and you realize that there is a document and the source of the document, knowledge of that source really hits home your point, the claim of your paragraph, then absolutely do that separately. Maybe the source is as important as a piece of evidence that supports your claim. Maybe knowledge of the source helps make your case. If that's true, you could approach the source separately of the evidence. Because a source could be evidence to your claim. It can be 2 things. Okay. I'm looking at my notes here, what I wanted to talk about today. I believe I had updates to the grading on this, so I did want to talk to you about that. You might have noticed changes in your overall grade. That's in part because I put a bunch of new stuff in, but also because I changed how the categories are weighted. I did this. I try not to change weighting because it's one of those things where you go into a class expecting certain things to have certain weights, and to change that throws things off. I kind of had to here due to the fact that there were some categories that had significant percentage point values that we just aren't filling up. So that is unfair. I have since given higher significance to homework. Now, I understand that this, for some of you, might throw you off because you are used to the homework being worth a certain value, and now that it's not, it's affecting your grade differently. I am considering a remedy to that, and I will present it to you as an idea. This is a draft idea, meaning it's not for sure. I'm looking for feedback. So right now, I've been giving you a lot of homework to do and to turn in, and that homework is now worth, I think I put it at 30% of your grade. I would be open to later on having essentially an exam that would count for the homework category. And this exam would allow a student, depending on the score on that exam, would allow a student to improve his or her grade up to a certain point. Let's just say, for sake of argument, that this exam, if taken and scored perfectly, could raise a student's homework grade to a 95%. Let's say that's the cap. This would mean that a student who already has a 95% in that category would not need to take it. So this would be essentially a selective or optional experience, in that in doing this, if right now all you're focused on is the AP test coming up in a week and not getting the COVID, and you can't process anything else, this would be a way for you to say, you know what, I'm going to ignore this, and once the test is over, I can get back into it, and I have another way of trying to improve my score. And for those of you who were able to do the homework, you gain something. You gain the ability to not have to worry about this thing later. Does that sound like a reasonable solution to y'all? It gives you, it would, if we did this, it would give you the opportunity to improve your grade if you're weak on homework right now because of everything that is happening, especially because homework's more important now because of the COVID. And for those of you who did
Mr.
everything,
Herman,
you don't have to worry. Yeah.
what's the percentage of homework in overall grades right now?
30. I think it's 30.
Okay. And
that's
for other things?
15. So I doubled the significance of homework, and I decreased the significance of the textbook quizzes because we're not doing the weekly Friday quizzes. I decreased that. I decreased everything, and I left, or I think I slightly decreased the exam, but what I'm going to do is we, the teachers, will have the ability to take your AP exam and use that for your grade. So I'm going to leave the exam category nearly where it would be. And since I have access, I've never in the past had access to your exams until like July, so it's been pointless. This time, since I will have your exams, I can then grade those and use those to as part of your grade.
So does the AP score count as your grade?
No, but if there's too much divergence between your official score and the score I gave you, then what we can do is we can modify that. Like, let's say I'm like, this is terrible, 2, and the AP comes back and says, no, you got a 5. I would give deference to the AP score.
So how much does the exam weigh again?
I want to say it's 35, but I'd have to double check, which is not too much of an inconvenience. Let me double check. I have 2 minutes. Let's see if I can make this happen in 2 minutes. Oh, Julia likes my idea. Okay, good.
Mr. Herman, are you aware that you are allowed to petition our scores to the College Board?
Yes.
Just, something.
You are allowed to petition your scores to College Board. I imagine that's something that they say to make people feel better. I don't imagine that it will be a very effective method. What will likely happen is if there's too much of a problem or discrepancy, they'll say, all right, fine, just take the exam again when we do the retakes. If any of you are thinking that you are going to just plan on doing the retake, remember that we do not know if the retake will be harder, how that will be set up. They might have it done in a different way that you can't predict. So I would recommend to be careful with any plans that involve definitely taking the retake. Okay, here's how the breakdown is. Exams are 40%, textbook quizzes are 30%, and that was a reduction. There's I think 4 or 5 textbook quizzes in there, and what I might do is I might have another quiz element. I was considering making the pieces chart a quiz element, but that just got too complicated. Anyway, the textbook quizzes have been reduced. Homework, wait, sorry, I'm lying, I'm looking at first, no wonder it looked wrong. That was the first semester. Okay, so the exam is 35%, homework is 30%, the essay test is 20%, and the textbook quizzes are 15%. That's one element I forgot to talk about. So you have one essay test in your grade. I want to make sure that you have at least 2. So what I will do as you're preparing, I'm going to assign to you by the end of this week an essay test, the DBQ. It's going to be practice for the DBQ next week. I will, however, give you feedback and a score. After the DBQ is done, I will allow you to rewrite it as I have rewrite the practice one, rewrite that, and submit it for a final score that will go into your essay test category. Does that make sense? So that way you'll have at least 2 essay tests there in the essay test category. And then textbook quizzes are down to 15 because I think there were only 4 textbook quizzes there. That makes more sense. So, any feedback, please write me a message or ask a question. This is not set in stone, but this is the direction I'm going with how I'm figuring out the grades and how to try to make it fair and balanced and equitable for all of you, which is a little tricky. And so know that I'm not telling you, this is how it is. I'm telling you, this is how it likely will be, but I'm open to some feedback. Anything? All right, then I can bid you adieu, go in peace, have a wonderful day, and look for that posted assignment that'll come up today.
Mr. Herman.